Revelation 2802. From the 7th of July 1943. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The spirit is willing but the flesh is weak, for the flesh still belongs to God's opposing power because it still harbors many spiritual substances within itself which are immature, thus at the beginning of their higher development. And these substances are still too much under the adversary's control. They push towards him and also try to pull the human being's soul along with them. And thus the spirit in the human being wages a constant battle with all immature entities which surround him. Although the soul has decided in favor of him, it is still surrounded by entities in need of purification, and they constantly press it to turn towards the world, by which is meant everything that is beneficial, that is pleasant, for the body of flesh. The soul is very often weak and not able to offer enough resistance to these desires. And yet it must try to overcome this countercurrent, it must wrestle with itself, it must only direct its will towards what the Spirit imparts to it. It must desire to hear it and reject every temptation from outside by paying no attention to them and only desiring to hear the voice of the Spirit. It must pray fervently for the supply of strength and not tire, for God allows all these temptations in order to strengthen the will and faith so that it will prove itself in greater oppositions which approach it from outside. The human being is still fighting against purely physical desires and resistances, but a time will come when he will have to withstand external temptations, when he shall prove himself before the world and when the body will not only have to renounce but also take on suffering in order to give the world an example of strong, unshakable faith. Strength will always and constantly be supplied to him so that his will become strong. And this will shall already be strengthened by overcoming small resistances. The soul shall only ever remain united with the Spirit within it, it shall learn to despise everything worldly, it shall pass it by without impression and by no means hold it back from spiritual striving. The weakness of the flesh shall be fought against and the result will be an ever stronger will which overcomes everything that opposes it. But this strong will cannot be achieved without a fight. Otherwise it would be an undeservedly received grace which has to bring the human being to maturity without him striving for it. The supply of strength from God is certainly such a grace, but it has to be requested time and again, and thus the prayer for increased will supply him with strength and grace. His will become stronger, for then the human being will call upon God himself for his help. And then this will also be available to him in abundance. Prayer, too, is a means of battle against the enemy's temptations, although even the will can be so weakened that it is incapable of prayer, for this also requires the will which, however, will then also find support. But the human being must not willingly surrender to the temptations, the enticements of the world. He must not become so weak that he is no longer able to pray. In every adversity of the soul he must take refuge in prayer, in God, who will then truly not leave him without help. He must pay attention to the subtle voice of the Spirit which will urge him to pray, to call upon God for strength and grace. Only then will all weakness of the flesh be overcome. He will become strong in spirit and his will defeat all resistance. Amen.